What does it mean when people say to follow your dreams or to dream big or the life or the love of your dreams? Let us deconstruct a little bit, because what I have observed on the reality shifting journey is that there is, or I should say, because it's not just one, there are very special places, dimensions, that as you continue practicing reality shifting, you start to actually experience. But because they're so dreamy, and particularly if you are coming from a binary, reductionist, logical, rational, hyper-rational society, you will have a tendency, like I do, of taking the dream and crushing it before it has a chance to become realized. So, dreaming, if we think about the act of falling asleep, and you know that threshold where you're halfway awake. This is why I love to meditate before I go to sleep. You're halfway awake, and then you start to slip into more chaotic thought patterns. What does that mean? It means non-linear, non-rational, non-logical. It's almost as though your brain is starting to fire in different ways. And what's beautiful about this divergent brainwave activity, you see, when we are from linear binary societies, we call this thinking style, right or wrong, yes or no, the very rigid, logical, ordered. First, we talk about this, then I'm going to talk about this, and third, I'm going to talk about this. That is convergent thinking. And when I was working at a late stage startup and education company, we actually would train teachers on the different thinking styles, because it's very important to realize that there are some people that are oriented towards convergent, linear, binary thinking. Our society is built on that. Thank God we never have to think about what to do when we see a red light or a green light or a yellow light. There is only one correct answer. And similarly, if you take the MCAT or if you take other standardized tests, the mathematics portion in particular, there is only one correct answer. And then there's another style of thinking, divergent thinking. This is where the artistic brain is, the creative mind, the ability to connect dots and to weave similar but yet distinct concepts, to see the similarities that nobody else does, to have almost secret sight or vision into a world, the world. And this is a very special form of thinking. But people who predominantly have this style of thinking may not do as well on the mathematics part of the world. And that's okay. There's room for you too. And they may be more adept at languages or analogies or metaphors or visual arts. And so as you are going to sleep, your brain shifts into divergent thinking. This is what happens to me. And all of a sudden, random people start showing up, random connections are made, random insights are found. Some of them are not noteworthy, but some of them are. And it's very similar to why it is so powerful to keep a dream journal if you're called. It's not so important if you're not called to. But But if you are, there are nuggets of information and crystals and gems of insights that you can look back years later and see a pattern or a theme. It's like a message in a bottle from your subconscious mind, and sometimes from downloads from the higher mind of the universe. And so what's fascinating is that when we say go for your dreams, when we understand what it means to be dreaming, what we're really talking about is do that wild thing that nobody, including yourself really, thinks is logical or rational. Go for the stars. Go for this vision that doesn't quite make sense. People might even raise an eyebrow. And what that means is that you're stepping out of the ordinary box, what is expected, so far that now we're in the bucket of dreamland. And this is where magic can happen. And those of you who have experienced reality shifting talk about entering into this state, this other dimension, where very strange and unusual things happen. I, for one, when it first started happening to me, had a weird thing with animals. And I remember being in Dallas and walking at night, and this bunny rabbit, I'm in the middle of an urban area, close to downtown. I'm not there anymore, but I was. And this bunny rabbit just pops out of nowhere and starts approaching me. And it is improbably looking at me. And I feel this magic in the moment. I feel like if I was Alice in Wonderland, it would take me down a rabbit hole. And my first reaction was, what the F? I'm losing it. And then it happened again. And then it happened again with a different rabbit in a different place in Dallas at night. And other people talk about squirrels, birds. Birds are a big one. The birds will talk to some people. The birds will flock around some people. Other people have other animal symbols that approach them, and it's almost this improbable, illogical, irrational. Can't tell Uncle Bob at Thanksgiving dinner if you celebrate Thanksgiving, especially if he's from the normal world, because the whole table is just going to go quiet. Somebody might even drop a fork. And this is what happens when you start to reality shift and you start to open the doors to the unknown. You start to see these magical occurrences. And if you have a community, people who are also experiencing something similar, and feel free to leave a comment if you would like to share your experience. I love hearing about it, and it helps other people too, to realize that they're not alone, because a lot of people go through it alone. And what happens is that if you're used to habitually trying to make sense of everything, then you will gaslight yourself, or you will take the magic and you'll crush it. I remember the first time it happened, I went back to my apartment. I laid in bed as I was going to sleep, but I couldn't go to sleep. I just lay there with my eyes open. And I was wondering, I'm like, what is going on? There's something going on. Absolutely. I could feel it, but I couldn't make sense out of it. I call this looking for the Easter eggs. I referenced this in some of my other recordings. These are the magical, mysterious moments that you want to acknowledge. This was advice given to me early on in my journey, was to look for the Easter eggs. And I like to pass down this advice because imagine for a moment that you have two worlds in front of you. The normal, old world, the habitual world, and the magical world. In reality, it's not so simple, but just for the sake of example, when you start looking for the Easter eggs, what you do is you acknowledge the magic. You file it away. It doesn't change your moment substantially. It's just like in a video game, where if you find an Easter egg, it's like a moment of surprise. It's a moment of fun. It's a moment of kinship, almost like reminders that it's working. And then you go back to your level. You go back to what you were doing, but you tuck it away. And you notice that over time, it gets more and more distinct, more and more frequent, more and more profound. But first, you have to acknowledge the presence of the magic. I talk to some people who want the magic, but when they are presented with the magic, they run away. They shut it down. They ignore it. I'm like one of those. Pretend I didn't see it, and then I'll process it later on, and then I'll get a second or a third look. But I'm very, very stoic. I have a great poker face if you ever see me out in public. And there's a magical moment between us. I'll probably not acknowledge it. I might even look past you, but I will feel it, and then I'll go and I'll process it. It's just my thing. And then I'll prepare myself to receive or to go towards the next time, if there is a next time. And so you want to honor it, even if it's a silent honoring, even if it's a private honoring. You want to hold space, hold energy space to let it unfold in the way that it wants to unfold. I remember when I was doing some heavy reality shifting in Costa Rica and was up on the mountain. I've talked about it a couple of times. And I fully entered into an alternate universe there. And it was wild. Other people were having magical experiences too. We were talking about it. I mean, the place was called Eden after all. And the sunsets were unbelievably, bizarrely miraculous. I mean, it was unlike anything that we had seen before. And when we would shift into, I was shifting, I don't know about everybody else, but when I would shift, I would see other versions of the people who were staying on the mountain too. And one of them in particular also seemed to be a knowledgeable shifter, although kept that to themselves. And I remember walking out of my little suite. This was during the pandemic, so we were all kind of cooped up together. We had our own rooms. It was a nice hotel. And so when we'd walk out our door, we'd walk out into the shared common area. And I remember walking out and seeing the person who I thought was aware of reality shifting as well, but had their own method and whatnot. And I'll never forget, first of all, the way that they looked was different, subtly different. But the way they looked at me with this knowing look, almost as though, oh, you finally caught up. You finally got here. Good job. But they didn't say anything. And that was so unusual because it was a passing acknowledgement without words. And here is why that's so powerful, because what I have seen in my own experience as a reality shifter is that when you really start to shift into other versions of people and other dimensions, your behavior patterns, the person who you are, and this is what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, and it's true. I'm here to tell you it's absolutely true. Who you show up as to that reality is critically important. And if you show up as a version of yourself that is tethered to an old reality, and without thinking, I've done it, without thinking, you just blurt out the normal thing that you're used to blurting out. It reminds me of when I went to 7-Eleven and they would say, "Hey, how's it going? How's it going today?" And I had a 7-Eleven by my apartment in Dallas, and I would go there often. Did some grocery shopping there because I realized I couldn't go into a big box store. Otherwise, I was going to get anchored into a reality layer that I wasn't sure I wanted to stay in. So I managed by eating mostly gas station food, but they had amazing food there, actually. It was perfect. So I would go there often, and there was this routine. "Hey, how's it going? Do you want anything else with that?" And then I'd buy my smokes and et cetera, et cetera. And it was the act of going through this routine that really weirded me out, because I would go back to my apartment in Dallas and have these wild experiences. And then I'd go out and it was like zipping everything up, zoop, and shutting everything down and almost becoming like a robot. And so what happens is when you start to shift into these dreamland experiences, if you take that robotic, rote behavior pattern that you have, the very orderly, "Hey, how's it going? Oh, yeah, I'm doing great. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Talk to you soon." You enter into a dream world and you're like, "Hey, how's it going?" You're entering in with the wrong vibe, the wrong frequency. This is even more important if you're not fully embodied. I remember seeing another woman who was on the mountain, and when I would shift into this dreamland world, it was like I was looking at the goddess version of her. She was so refined, so postured, so elegant. And then when I would shift back to the normal, quote, normal world, a normal version of her, she was almost childlike and not as womanly. And that's not a disparaging comment. It was like she hadn't stepped into the blossoming of her womanhood. She still had a very strong youthfulness about her, playfulness, and that was kind of her personality. That was her thing. And the way she told jokes, the way she laughed, the way that she carried herself was very, very youthful, versus the goddess version of her, which was this radiant elegance, gentle but firm empowerment. It was really intriguing to see. Not to mention she became shinier, like more radiant, like literally her skin looked shinier. But when we spoke, and I too experienced a similar change, but when we spoke to each other, it broke the spell. And all of a sudden, we shifted back into, quote unquote, the normal world. So by looking for the Easter eggs, by acknowledging the magic, you create room for it to fill your life, but it takes practice, in my experience.